Hello, welcome everyone to our webinar on the EB5 Visa program. Um, we thank you all for joining us, and I'm going to start this in a moment right here. But before we really get into things, I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that this presentation is for educational purposes only. And it's not intended to provide specific guidance or legal advice. You should not rely on this general information to make decisions about specific immigration matters nor EB5 investment decisions. We're here to provide information in a general education setting. I'm also joined today by Inderjit Sidhu. And in a moment, we'll get to know her a little bit more. But I just wanted everyone to know that all of your mics are muted. Your web cameras have been turned off. And if you have a question, please make sure to write it in the Q&A section as shown in the graphic here. And when we finish our presentation, we will get to all your questions and get some answers for those. So without further ado, please meet Miss Inderjit Sidhu and Indy. She goes by Indy. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Kyle, for that introduction. And thank you, attendees, for tuning into our discussion today. As Kyle mentioned, we want to put this together and provide a informational session, and we'll have time at the end for the Q&As that Kyle had mentioned. Now, in terms of who I am, so I'm an attorney that's been licensed in the states of New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Michigan. I've been practicing for over 20 years. We've seen the immigration process over 5 administrations, and definitely there's been a lot of changes in the immigration sphere, especially in the last administration that we just had. The primary focus of my practice is in business, employment, immigration. We work with individuals, startups, corporations, assist them with their immigration needs. Our goal or mantra in our office is that we like to navigate, we meet our clients' challenges head on, and we navigate them through the complex immigration process. On an individual level, as a corporation, what their needs are, we work with them, identify them, and look at the path forward for them.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll do a brief introduction of myself.
Sure.
My name's Kyle Kamin. I work at Cmb Regional Centers. I've been with the company for 3 years now. I lived in China for 8 years, and when I was first hired, I primarily focused on our Chinese limited partners and prospects from that part of the world, the Mandarin-speaking part of the world. And since starting my role here at CMB, I also assist with limited partners and potential clients coming from other English-speaking parts of the world as needed. But yes, I work for CMB Regional Centers. And so who is CMB Regional Centers? We are a regional center authorized by the USCIS. In fact, originally we were authorized by the INS, which predates the USCIS. CMB's been in EB5 for over 23 years. We're one of the largest, most successful regional centers in the EB5 Visa Regional Center program. We have 100% project approval, and we have over 5,700 families that have trusted us with their EB5 immigration from over 100 different countries. As we break down those stats a little bit more, you're seeing numbers here where it says nearly 5,000 I-526 approvals and over 1,600 I-829 approvals. We're going to get into what an I-526 and an 829 is a little bit later in this presentation. But these would be milestone markers in your immigration timeline. So CMB, again, we've got that 100% project approval, meaning that all of our limited partners that have subscribed with us have gotten their I-526 and I-829s approved on the business side of the EB5 program. To go further into our staff here, CMB, we have 50 plus staff members and 16 different languages spoken in-house here. Our staff is broken down into, like my department, the investor relations team. We're kind of on the front lines communicating with people who are interested in EB5, providing them information, working with their attorneys to make sure that the process is going smoothly and ultimately following them through the immigration timeline after they make that investment. Our client relations team works directly with the attorneys on more of the technical side of things, making sure that we have the information we need, and this information is clearly communicated between CMB and the filing attorneys that were retained by the limited partners. Besides that, we have our marketing team. We have 5 in-house attorneys, a chief of compliance to make sure that what we say and what we do is in compliance with the SEC and keeping us out of trouble. We have a project development team, which is kind of the engine under the hood of CMB. Without the project development team, we wouldn't be able to boast this 100% project success that we have over our long history. So part of that team includes an array of different analysts. We have our own in-house economists that are vital in identifying TEA, which is something that we'll talk about later, vital in doing jobs reports, which is something that we'll also touch on a little bit later. But just to know that Cmb Partnership, it goes through many, many, many steps before it actually gets opened for people to subscribe and invest into it. So a lot of this work happens up front, behind the scenes, where we're able to get this ready for a subscription after it kind of ticks all of our boxes. And so just to kick off this this EB5 webinar, we're looking at the Visa Bulletin from April of 2021. And I'm gonna let Indy talk here about what the Visa Bulletin is and kind of what we're looking at here and what some of these dates and the C's mean, and get us familiar with the EB5 visa category.
Okay, sure. Kyle, before I dive into an explanation of Visa Bulletin and what the final action date means or filing action dates might mean, I wanted to sort of tag on to what you just said about regional centers. So as an investor, there's, the investor, you do have a responsibility to do your own due diligence, right? In identifying if a regional center is going to be the right regional center for you, the investment. So the things that you should be thinking of and considering, and it'll make a lot more sense as we go through our webinar and our presentation. But as an investor, you should be looking at, what is your investment goal, and does the regional center work with that investment goal, right? The investment, EB5 does require it to be at risk. And again, we're going to explain what that means, it being at risk. But I look at, the regional center and their experience and their success, because that will reflect on the limited financial risk you may have when it comes to your investment. And the third thing is you look at, do you have a low immigration risk? And again, that is tied into your regional center, because a strong regional center that has a history of approvals, the risk is lower in terms of a denial of a petition. So I just wanted to, get that in there, because sometimes when we start talking, we forget about some of these things, right? But this is really important, I think, 3 bullet points that as an investor, you want to always keep in mind. So going now into the Visa Bulletin. So the Visa Bulletin is what we, the USCIS, the Department of State, uses in determining whether or not we're going to be in a position to be able to file for your green card or legal permanent residency in the US, or is the consulate going to be now able to process your application petition. So the EB5, the first application that we have to submit for you as an investor is the I-526 petition. The date that petition is filed with the USCIS, you're given what's called a priority date. Okay, that's a really important date because until your priority date is current, if you're outside overseas, the U.S. consulate is not going to schedule an interview for you. Okay, if you're in the U.S., we won't be able to file what's called an I-485 adjustment of status application until that priority date is current. So if you look at the visa bulletin that's on the screen in April, EB5 is at the very bottom. It's the 5th non-regional center and then 5th regional center. Now, that row applies to both regional centers and direct EB5s. And the reason why we wanted to break it up for you is the priority dates will not change if it's a direct or a regional center, but in terms of what your involvement will be in that EB5 investment, that may be impacted. Okay, so the priority dates, I'm going to use China as an example. So these are the priority dates for April. What the priority date means is that if you were a national from China and you had an I-526 that was filed before August 15, 2015, as of April 21, we would be able to, the US consulate would either have reached out to you and said, you need to file a DS-260. Again, your immigration attorney would be able to assist you with that. Or if you're here in the United States, we would have been able to file for your adjustment of status application for you and your dependents. That's why that priority date or that date becomes really important, because that's going to dictate when we can actually move you into getting the conditional green card that you'll get upon approval. Okay, and again, the other thing with the visa bulletin I want to point out is each month the Department of State, they're the ones who publish. The Department of State in the U.S. is the department that publishes the visa bulletin. So each month these dates may move up or down. So as an example, I looked up to see, did we get the May publication? And we did. Actually, it came out yesterday. The Department of State published May, and the priority date for China didn't change. But if you look at Vietnam, the date there is December 15, 2017, but in May, it moved up. It moved up to 2018. So you see how these dates become important, because they're the ones that we're going to track to see when we can file for your green card.
And then all of these other ones, they say C. What does the C mean?
C means that it's current. That means that there isn't a backlog or retrogression. So if you're from India, Mexico, Philippines, or a country that's not China or Vietnam, if your 526 application has been approved, you're going to immediately move to the permanent residency phase of filing.
Okay. And then one more quick question as we stay on this page.
Sure.
Can you explain a little bit more the difference between a non-regional center and a regional center EB5?
Yep, I can. So the investment itself and the investment amount does not change. Neither does the TEA designation. And again, we'll explain what TEA means and what it stands for. It is, TE is the acronym for targeted employment. area. So those are two important things, but the direct investment means that your investment dollars are investing in a commercial enterprise, and that commercial enterprise has to create what's called 10 direct US jobs. Okay. Whereas with a regional center, you still have the requirement, the minimum investment requirements, whether it's a TEA or a non-TEA. And you also have the requirement that you have to create 10 US jobs, but the US jobs don't have to be direct. They can be indirect or induced. So an example of a direct job is a operational job where you're on that company's payroll, right? An indirect job. So for a regional center, you've got the direct jobs, then you have indirect and induced. Indirect jobs would be jobs that are created by a supplier to the commercial enterprise that you're going to be investing in. Induced jobs, that widens the number of jobs that are created and what we can calculate as part of a job creating enterprise or entity. And that's where you have, employees of the indirect job creation who then go out and spend their earnings in different areas. There could be a coffee house or, go shopping, something like that. But that's an induced type of job. So the definition of the jobs being created does increase.
Okay, so we're looking at the primary difference between a non-regional center and a regional center would be how the job creation happens.
Yeah. And how it's calculated, yeah.
Okay, and how it's calculated.
Yeah.
So a non-regional center Eb5 pursuit would not be able to capture indirect and induced jobs?
No, it would not.
And we can get a little bit more into job creation further on, but I'm going to go to our next slide here, which is, what is the Eb5 visa and who is it for? Indy, when people are reaching out to you or inquiring about Eb5, I'm sure that one of the things that you're talking with them about is, what their goals are for this immigration.
Right.
Who is the Eb5 visa? Who does it benefit, or what sort of people do you find typically look into Eb5?
So the Eb5 investment visa benefits individuals who have the resources that they can invest and obtain a green card. It's one of the most direct paths or routes to obtaining a green card, or the legal term, legal permanent residency, and then ultimately citizenship, right? But it does require an investment amount. Okay. And that investment amount is set through regulations, and it had previously had been at 500, but it's changed. Now it's 900,000 for if the business is in what's called a targeted employment area, or TEA, or it's in a non-TEA area. If it's a non-TEA area, your investment is 1.8 million. If it's a TEA, then the investment is 900. And what is a TEA, right, Kyle? And the TEA, or the targeted employment area, is it is a set definition, and regulations do define it. The USCIS now, it takes a more direct role in terms of determining if an area is in a TEA area, but the TEA is either it's defined as rural, or that the unemployment rate is 150,000 above the national unemployment rate. So in terms of their calculations, they've already designated certain areas within the US that would qualify as a TEA. And if your regional center or your investment is in the TEA, then your investment amount would be the 900,000. And that's what you want to look for. You want to look for your investments to be in a TEA area, because the investment is much lower than the 1.8 million.
Okay. And then so just to elaborate a little bit on that,
Mhm.
CMB and our project development team, we have many developers reaching out to us on an annual basis, looking for EB5 financing for their projects. And one of the first stops that it goes through in our project development team would be through our team of economists. And so what we're looking for first is, will it qualify as a TEA? And so our team of economists, they go through the census tract data at the particular address of where this project is going up or planned to be built, to see if it qualifies as a target employment area. Um, and so if the project doesn't qualify as a TEA, we most likely wouldn't take that project on. CMB in the past, we have taken on non-TEA projects. I believe we've had two in the past, and it was to prove to people that it can be done, that people are willing to invest that amount of money. But typically, and moving forward, I would say that all of our investments would be in a TEA. And then the next thing that they're doing, the other box that they're going to tick with our econ team, is the job creation. And so our econ team, they use an input output model called RIMS2, and they're purchasing job creation multipliers from the Bureau of Economic Statistics, and they're inputting these job creation multipliers into this tool, as well as the total capital spending of how much this project is going to, how much is going to be spent to complete this construction. And what it does is it kind of spits out a number of what the total estimated job creation will be for indirect and inducedly created jobs, and any sort of model derived direct jobs. And this way, when we're doing this first glance at this project, we have an incredible idea of, will it qualify in a TEA, and what the total job creation is going to be. Um, when we set up a partnership, we have three goals, and our number one goal is this going to satisfy the requirements for the EB5 visa program, where you're making an at-risk investment and you're creating 10 new full-time jobs. So these are some of the first things that we're looking at. Families are trusting us with their immigration to the United States, and so we want to make that as feasible as possible. Um, the other requirement I just mentioned was this investment must be at risk. And so, Indy, did you have anything that you wanted to say about the at-risk factor in this?
I do, but if I could just tag on to what you just talked about with the job creation. One of the things, we've discussed this with regarding CMB, but the minimum requirement is 10 new full-time jobs, but you do want to look at the project to see if it's slightly more than that, because you don't want it to come below at any point. So when the project is giving you more than 10 new full-time jobs, that's a positive for the project itself. So going into now and I'm sure when you're when you were talking about the project, you're going to go into the job creation some more in detail. Yeah. So regarding investment, so your investment has to be at risk. What that means is that the investment that you're putting in for the EB5, you can't use or have any language that says that we're going to guarantee your money back, right? At risk means that the money that you're investing, you may get a profit, there might be a loss, but it is at risk. When you have an investment where they say you're going to have a guarantee back, the USCIS doesn't like that language. They don't like to see it, because then they don't think of it as a net risk investment. So that's a consideration in terms of what is considered to be at risk.
Okay, so yeah, chance for profit, chance for loss.
Loss, yeah.
And we can't have anything that says that there's a guarantee you're going to get this money back.
Right.
No promises, no redemption agreements. These would kind of be disqualifiers according to the USCIS.
Right. And the other, the other part of that analysis is your investment, right? What's your end goal? Is your investment to get a high return on your investment, or is the investment for the purposes or is your goal to get legal permanent residency or a green card? And that's, so you may, the project may not have a high return, but in some ways you're mitigating some of your financial risk in that way, but the investment itself is at risk. So that is part of that analysis. If you see an EB5 where they're guaranteeing XYZ, that, that's a red flag for the USCIS, and they don't like to see that.
Okay, thank you. One of the topics that comes up quite often when I'm speaking with people that are inquiring about EB5, we're going over the requirements of EB5, and then we get to source of funds. This is something that I don't talk with anybody about because CMB, we do manage the business side of this investment, but we also require that you're working with an experienced EB5 immigration attorney. And part of that, this key role that's played in these initial petitions that are filed would be the source of funds or having clean capital. Indy, can you walk us through a little bit more on what the job is with source of funds, or your role in that?
Yeah, source of funds, it's a really important component. So when you're investing, the USCIS wants to make sure that the investment, the monies that are coming in, it's clean money, it's coming from legitimate means, right? So if you're investing $900,000, we need to show, where did that 900,000 come from? So if you've got a savings account, we need to show, okay, you built up a savings account. How did you build up that savings account? Was it through salary? Was it through business? What kind of business was it? So if it was through business, we'd need business corporate documents. If it was through a salary, we would need employment history. So we need your pay stubs. If you filed, if it was salary based, and we would need your tax returns. If it's a corporation, we'd need the corporate tax returns. If you had, if you borrowed money or you took out a loan or a mortgage, well, depending on the type of lender, we may need to have information regarding the lender. So if you're going to a private lender, we would need to be able to show that where did the money from the private lender come in. So think of it as that you follow the money trail, right? I've got 900,000 I'm sending to CMB. Well, where did I get my 900,000? I got it from salary, maybe some investments that I had done that I cashed in my stocks and bonds. If you've cashed in stocks and bonds, well, where did you get the money for your stocks and bonds? You got it from your savings account. That's how you grew your money. We need to be able to show every step of the way, how did you obtain the 900,000? And it has to be through legitimate means. It can't be through, illegitimate means. I know a lot of, countries overseas, families, tend to sometimes keep, large amounts of cash at home. Well, you can't deposit that cash in the bank and then say, I've got 900,000. We're going to want to know, where did you get the 900,000? Where did you get that cash, that large deposit? We need to be able to show that the money was obtained through legal means.
Okay. And so, yeah, the role of an immigration attorney, and this work that you would be doing with Indy on source of funds, I'm sure that you'd want to get whatever documents she's asking for over to her, because the USCIS wants to know that these funds were lawfully and legally obtained, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then so you're creating that history of these funds to make it apparent and obvious to the USCIS that yes, it's clean capital. Right?
Yeah.
Excellent. And then I'm going to jump into how to invest in a CMB partnership. And first and foremost, we're all kind of at this step right now, and it's this preliminary step: understanding EB5, understanding regional centers, engaging an attorney, and doing your due diligence. And doing your due diligence is the most important part of EB5. This is a large amount of money, and it's not just your typical investment, because there's immigration involved too. Um, Families are uprooting themselves and replanting themselves in the United States. Um, we need to make sure that these families understand that investment that they're making, and understanding that their goals are going to be met, through this investment, this ultimate immigration permanent residency goal. Um, so before this investment happens, do your due diligence, read the offering documents, understand the investment, understand what risk is involved, and at the same time, engage the attorney. Make sure you ask questions to the attorney on anything dealing with this immigration path, and provide the documents that the attorney is looking for to create a great source of funds portfolio for your petition that you would be sending to the USCIS. After you've been satisfied, or you're satisfied with your due diligence, and you're ready to go with your personal documents and the personal side of things, next would be the subscription process. CMB, we have a two-part subscription process. We have a set of signature pages that we would have approved by our administrative placement agent. And once they approve that, the next step would be to transfer or fund the partnership, that investment. And we would want to make sure that you had a green light from your attorney, or the thumbs up from the attorney to say, yep, it's okay to transfer those funds to do that wire transfer into the partnership. And once that subscription process has been completed, so the signature pages are in, the transfer's been made, and the subscription amount's been fully funded, then CMB would provide Indy with the filing template, the I-526 filing template, which would be the business plan of the investment. And we would put placeholders in there where your attorney, where Indy would insert your information to try and streamline the process for the attorney. They're large documents. I'm sure Indy can attest to the size of these documents, and she has to print them all out, unfortunately, and send hard copies to the USCIS, right?
Yeah, USCIS has not moved to a digital age for a lot of their processing, even though the rest of the world is moving that way. So yeah, it is a large file. It's a large petition that does get to it does need to be submitted, and and it's really helpful when the regional center provides the supporting documentation with reference to the investment itself, because the USCIS is going to need that as an attorney, representing your clients in this process. We will work with them in obtaining the personal biodata information, the source of funds, documentation. But the second component of that, of course, is the project related documents. And that is really important when you get good detailed documentation from a regional center.
And sort of an alternate question, looking back at like a non-regional center EB5 pursuit, when you're doing one of those, where do these business plan and these other business related documents come from?
You're responsible for them. So as a direct investor, you would be responsible, you would need to obtain the business plan. So if you're creating a new commercial enterprise, has no history, right? You're going to need to have that. You're going to have to engage a business plan writer to build that business plan for you. If you're investing, if you're doing a direct investment in a distressed business, you're still going to need to have the business plan. And so that means that you have to engage a third party to do that business plan. And then you, as the investor, do have a responsibility to review the business plan to ensure that, the business plan is what you intend. Now, your immigration attorney can review it with you to ensure that the requirements are met. But at the end of the day, you're having a much more direct day-to-day role in a direct investment, in a direct EB5. And so the energy and effort that you have to put in to get those documentation in place, it exponentially does increase.
Thank you for that explanation. And then back in line with CMB Regional Centers, our investment structure pretty much looks like this in a nutshell. And so what we're doing is we're opening a limited partnership. The EB5 investor family would be subscribing into the limited partnership, and they would become limited partners. CMB Regional Centers would be the general partner. We're a true fiduciary as a general partner, meaning that the decisions that we make in the direction of the partnership or how we're managing this partnership is in the best interest of the limited partnership and the limited partners. What our limited partnership does is we pool all the investor funds together, and we deploy them in the form of a loan, and that would go to a borrower, was a developer to be used on a large construction and or infrastructure project. And it's through the loan agreement that we're able to mitigate a lot of the risk, the required risk. The loan, we can set terms, set maturity dates, collateral. And so this is what's protecting that investment, is that loan agreement. CMB Regional Centers, our loans have a 6-year maturity date. And so the borrower of this EB5 loan would be repaying those loans back to the partnership, by or before that maturity date. So this is just a general graphic on more of a visualization of how that partnership would work with CMB Regional Centers. One thing that we can touch on is what these I-526 petitions are and these I-829 petitions. Indy, if you wouldn't mind, maybe we can do like a brief walkthrough of what this timeline looks like. And then we can go over to our next page, which is talking about these processing times at the USCIS.
Okay, sure. Well, so I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to necessarily pinpoint the timelines, because those timelines are moving timelines based on the USCIS. But we can dive into it in a little bit more detail as we go through this timeline. So you've made the decision to invest, right? You've, as an investor, you're working with an immigration attorney. The time it takes from the time that you make that decision to us filing the I-526 is really going to be dependent on how you've engaged. Have you entered into the subscription agreements? We're working on getting your documents. How good are those documents? The source of funds, we keep on going back to that, because that's where I think there's a lot of challenge sometimes in getting the supporting documentation for that. But once we reach that stage, we file the I-526. And when that I-526 is filed, we submit it to the USCIS, the Immigration Service. The timelines really is out of our control, because the USCIS process it, and it's a moving timeline. So
I'll jump over to it real quick.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask you to do that. So if you look at the timeline that Kyle has put on, this is directly from the USCIS. And you as an investor can go onto the USCIS website and type in processing timeframes and find this information yourself as well. But if you look at it, the I-526 processing timeframe right now, it's showing 29 to 57.5 months. Okay, what that means is that once your I-526 is filed, as of today, the Immigration Service is telling us that it's going to take at a minimum 29 months to get the I-526 approval. and could take up to 57.5 months. Okay. If you look at the bottom, there's the estimated time range. There's two sections. One is for China. So if you were China mainland born, if you look at the processing time frames per the USCIS is longer. So if you're not from, if you weren't born in China mainland, then the 29 to, is that 50.5? I think that's 50.5 months.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. I was trying to like it's pretty small print on my end. So it can take up to 50.5 months. Now, one of the things that may impact the processing time frame is if the USCIS requests additional information or evidence. I typically will see if the USCIS is going to request additional information, they want a clarification on source of funds when it comes to regional centers. Okay, the strength of the regional center, of course, is going to be important, but I typically, it's the source of funds where we see a lot more of the RFEs, which is why it's better to spend the time up front when you're putting all the documentation together rather than be reactive.
Right.
So 29 to 57.5 months would be for the I-526. Once that's approved, then you will be contacted by either the National Visa Center and the U.S. consulate that has jurisdiction over where you live if you're overseas, or if you're in the United States, then we will be able to file for your I-485 adjustment of status application for you and your derivative beneficiaries. That would be spouse and children. There's, if you've got a child that's reaching the age of 21, that's called an age out. There's certain considerations. And I think that's going to be outside of the scope of this presentation because there's a lot of nuances that are involved in calculating that. But there is, it may be possible that even age out children will be covered. Okay, so I would ask everybody to hold off. And then if you've got age out questions for children that are going to be reaching the age of 21, definitely reach out to an immigration attorney and they'll be able to talk to you about what you have, what may be available for you in terms of how to navigate that situation. But so we filed your I-485, or you've submitted your DS-260. If you submitted DS-260, you're going to be called in for an interview at the consulate or embassy. I-485, that's in the United States. Once that petition is filed and submitted, you will get a notice for a biometric, which is your fingerprinting notification. You go in to the center, designated center, you get your fingerprinting done. The reason why they do that is they want to make sure that you don't have anything illegal, or you don't have any arrests or anything like that that would prohibit you from being able to obtain permanent residency. Now, if you think that you say you had some traffic violations or some event had happened, talk to your immigration attorney. That's one thing that's really important. I always say is your doctor and your lawyer, those are the two people you should tell everything to, because they're the ones who can understand and navigate for you, right? Health-wise and risk mitigation. Those are the two things. So once your I-40, once you've done your fingerprinting, it's a matter of waiting for your adjustment of status to be approved, your conditional green card. If you're overseas, you're going to come in with a packet and it's, you get it processed at the port of entry. But if you're here in the US, you'll get your green card, conditional green card issued to you, and it'll be sent to you. And that's it. The conditional green card itself is for a 2-year period. Right. And the reason why it's for a 2-year period is because the Immigration Service, the government wanted to make sure that you were investing and your investment was going to create the jobs that they said we're going to create, right? So it's a check on the system validation of the investment.
Are they also just validating your immigration intent at this point too, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there's time that you have to spend in the United States following the laws of the United States, not committing major crimes or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. And we're required to file 90 days prior to the second year anniversary of your conditional residency. We file a removal of that condition. Okay, and that's what the I-829 is. The I-829 is the removal of condition. And that, if you go back, Kyle, if you go back to that chart, right? So you have the I-829 processing time frame. That's the time frame for the removal of condition. And currently it takes 37 to 248 days. And me and Kyle discussed that. We've never seen 248 days ever. This is, and
248 months.
Right. I'm sorry, 248 months. See, it's the 248 months, just as like insane amount of time. I do anticipate that time frame is going to go down. I think somebody took a look at it and said, what makes the maximum, what's the oldest case we have right now pending? Let's say that's how long it's going to take. I think that's really what happened, because that's not normal. But this is a sliding timeline again. So again, as a investor, you have your I-829 processing timeframe. You can always check these timelines on the USCIS website. And the other key thing about the processing timelines is, until we've exceeded the timeframe, we can't request an update on with the USCIS in terms of what's going on with your case, right? So, for example, if I had a I-526 that filed, I'm going to say January 1st, 2017, then I can, if I haven't received anything, I can request to make inquiries with the USCIS and say the processing time has exceeded the normal processing timeframes. But if my filing date was December 12, 2018, well, USCIS will be like, we're not even working on your case right now, so you can't ask for that. And I do want to let everybody know that these processing timeframes, yes, they're excessive, but there is, here in the US, there is redressability in terms of your attorney can file writs of mandamus or habeas corpus to try to speed up the process. But that's a completely different and outside the scope of this presentation, I think. But if we go back to the timelines, then so we filed your I-829, and once that's approved, you have a no conditional green card, and that green card or permanent resident card, legal permanent resident card, is valid for 10 years. Okay, and we had talked about it, but the return of capital sort of is because of just the length of the timelines. But typically the chart is what the process should be in terms of the path, including the return of capital, subject to or based on your subscription agreement with the regional center. So that's the subscription agreement is going to dictate in terms of return of capital.
How long
as possible.
Yeah. How long does the USCIS say that your funds must remain in the investment?
Well, the USCIS wants to see the funds during the conditional permanent residency period, right? So you're investing it at the I-526 through the conditional residency period. Now, we have to file the removal of the condition 90 days before the expiration of the second anniversary, right? Of the permanent resident card that you received, the legal permanent resident card you received. Normally, adjudications used to take a shorter period of time. That's not happening nowadays. So if you haven't received if your removal of condition has not happened by the time your conditional permanent residency has expired, that doesn't mean that you're not maintaining that permanent residency status, because the receipt notice that you have is valid for 1 year post the expiration of a conditional residency. So why is that important? It's important because when you travel, right, you want to be able to come back. Well, you travel with using your passport, your expired conditional residency card, and the receipt notice, which clearly says that your conditional residence has been extended for 1 year. So that's your proof that you still have a green card.
That's very good information. Very good to know.
Yeah.
So once our 829 gets approved, does that conclude our EB5 immigration process?
It does. It includes the EB5 immigration process from the regional center and investor perspective. But if you want to become a US citizen, then that's the natural progression, and is you do want to become a US citizen, right? Because as a US citizen, you get voting rights, you have additional protections. If you continue to be on a legal permanent resident, you have to renew it every 10 years. Mm-hmm. And change in administrations, as we saw in the previous administration, change in administration could impact processing. So there's a lot of factors that are involved, but it does end with the regional center once your I-829 is approved.
Indeed. Thank you so much for these very detailed explanations and walking us through this on the immigration side. I am going to touch briefly on CMB's current partnership. Mm-hmm. CMB, we've opened up our Group 79 limited partnership. It's called Pinnacle Build to Suit. That's what the BTS stands for. And it's located right outside Detroit, Michigan. Our Group 79 partnership is providing a loan to an entity of Hillwood Developments. If you were in the United States or familiar with U.S. politics in the 90s, Ross Perot Sr. At one point did try to run for president. And his son actually is the man who founded Hillwood Developments. CMB has built quite a track record with our partnerships that have loaned EB5 funds to Hillwood. In fact, you can see this is our 32nd partnership with Hillwood. So Hillwood has been around the block quite a few times with CMB. So this is not only CMB as an experienced regional center, but this is a borrower that is experienced with using EB5 funds for their projects. So you'll see that with Hillwood partnerships, we have had 26 partnerships that have already received their I-526 and I-924 approvals. 6 of the partnerships have already had limited partners that have received their I-829 approvals. And we've had 17 partnerships where Hillwood has paid the loan back already. Hillwood is a superb borrower. And in these throughout 2020, with the economy kind of going the way it was, CMB, we saw a lot of unpredictability with the world. And so our offerings for 2020 and this year, we wanted to make sure that this EB5 investment was going to be as predictable as possible. Because it's been a tough couple of years, right?
Extremely. I think last year has been tough for everybody.
Right. Some further details about our Group 79 partnership. This partnership is in a TEA, so it qualifies for that minimum investment amount of $900,000. There are 30 investor spots available in it. And we say up to 30. Hillwood, what they do is they put in overage of their own equity into these projects because they are shovel-ready projects. And in fact, Group 79 is currently under construction. Hillwood doesn't want to wait for CMB to raise a full EB5 raise before they can continue on with their construction. So what our EB5 loan is doing is it's backing out that portion of overage that Hillwood put into their project. And so we say up to 30 investors, meaning that if we don't get 30 investors in this project before we close this subscription period, that overage that of equity Hillwood put in would just remain in place, and the amount of the loan that was sent to them would be the loan amount. Yes. Total project spending for this project is 80 million, roughly $80 million. And when we look at job creation for 30 investors, we would need 300 jobs to be credited for everyone to get there, or to meet that requirement for the USCIS EB5. And this project is going to be estimated at around 522 jobs, indirect and inducedly created jobs. So that is a 74% job creation buffer, or roughly 17.4 jobs per investor. And when you're filing your I-829, the USCIS, they're only concerned with that number 10, right? If those extra
Yeah.
7.4 jobs, they're not going to give you a special reward.
No, they're not, but it helps you because, it just shows how the strength of the project.
Right. And so that's my introduction of the partnership that we have available right now. If you'd like to know more about it, you're welcome to reach out to me separately. If you have any immigration related questions, please reach out to Indy. We want to make sure that we're able to take care of you with a strong regional center and an experienced immigration attorney, where we're focusing on your immigration success, and then CMB, through the partnerships that we've created, we want to preserve that initial capital investment and get that return of capital back to you when you become eligible for return of capital. So I am going to open this up now.
Kyle,
Indy, did you have any? Yeah.
I was going to just ask you, could you explain the return of capital? So when you're returning capital, how does CMB assess
yeah, that's a really good question. Right, that's a really good question. And so it's what we need to see. Two things need to happen. One is related to your immigration timeline, and one is related to the loan that we provided to the borrower. So first, the USCIS, they did say that your funds must remain at risk in the investment until you've completed that 2-year conditional residency period. So this is one thing that would need to happen, is that you need to completed that conditional residency period. The other thing that needs to happen is the borrower of the EB5 loan needs to repay the partnership. And so generally what happens is, after the borrower has repaid their loan, CMB, we would review the partnership to see which limited partners have completed that 2-year conditional residency period, and they would be technically eligible for return of capital, and CMB excuse me, would reach out with an offer to purchase them out of the partnership, and that would serve as the return of capital. This is something that, again, we've done almost 1,600 or over 1,600 times with our EB5 investor family. And in fact, because our projects have been so successful in EB5, a lot of these families have come back to CMB to say, hey, do you have any other investments that are, that focus on the return? We had great success with you with our immigration. We're still kind of new to the United States, and we just got all this money back, and we want to place it somewhere. And they've had a great experience with CMB. And so we have started a second investment platform called Nhk Capital Partners. That's more of a traditional investment that focuses on the returns. And a lot of our limited partners that have been through the cycle, and some that are currently in the process right now, if they're interested in these alternate investment opportunities, they would be placing an investment into that investment platform. So it is that attention to detail to our limited partners, making sure that we're focusing on their immigration success first, and then the preservation of that initial capital investment, and ultimately that return of capital.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, is preservation of that capital, because again, it's not a guarantee, but the organization, the regional center, is doing what it can to ensure that there's a preservation and a return.
Yeah. All right. And then we do have a question up here, and this first question, I can look at it and I know that this is it's an Indi Sidhu question. Thank you for your question. They say, are we allowed to get a loan on the capital?
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a clarification, because when you say loan on the capital, are you asking, can you obtain a loan that then you can utilize for your investment? Or is it, can you get a loan on the investment that has already been done?
Obtain
a loan for the investment. Okay.
Yeah, obtain a loan for the investment to make the investment. Yes.
So you can obtain loans for the investment. It depends. And again, so when we look at investment or the monies, we are going to have to go. We are going to have to look at the source of the money. So if the money is coming from a loan, say if you from a mortgage or a line of equity that you have on existing property overseas, or even within the US, well, what we need to establish is that the equity or line of credit or loan that you've taken on that property, is that property in your name? Or is it in another person's name, right? Because if the property is in your name, that means that you're putting your own assets at risk, right? If you're going through a private lender, then USCIS wants to see where's that private lender obtaining their funds from too. And so if you're going to be going to a private lender, it's really important to have that conversation and say, look, this is my purpose for obtaining this loan, and I'm going to need you to help me establish where your source of funds are. Because you can show the source of funds from the loan, from the lender to you, but then from the lender, beyond the lender, we would need to see and establish that it's still, the source of funds are still legitimate source of funds. Okay, so the loan itself, the source of funds, it still plays a role and still a very important factor in determining.
So yeah, definitely something that would need to be made very clear with the immigration attorney, with Indy, and make sure that you knew step by step what needed to happen, or if it was even okay, right?
Right.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for answering that. The next question, how long does the process take? We did touch on this a little bit for the timeline. We did mention that it was at the USCIS, these petitions are a little bit, they're a moving target on precisely how long it takes.
Right.
But do you have any additional information you wanted to add on the actual length of the process?
Yeah, if I can. So, in the beginning, we talked about the visa bulletin, right? And the dates that are published by the Department of State in terms of in terms of, when you will be eligible to file for the permanent residency card, or you're going to application, or you're going the adjustment status application, or, when the council is going to reach out to you. And so when it comes to U.S. immigration, what the U.S. looks at is it's your nationality. So it's the country of birth that dictates, not country of citizenship. And that's a really important distinction. And the reason why it's an important distinction is if you've got a national, if your citizenship is, China or Vietnam, and I use those because those have a retrogression right now. If your citizenship is China or Vietnam, but say you were born in Singapore or you were born in Hong Kong, well, it's the place of birth that's going to control, right? So the backlog is for a Chinese national that's born in mainland China. If you were born in Hong Kong, it wouldn't apply to you. And that same, in that you look at that analysis, if you were born, if your nationality or your citizenship is China or your citizenship is Vietnam, but you were born in Thailand or, the Middle East, where you're born is going to dictate, and then that priority date may not be applicable to you. You may not be subject to a retrogression because it's the country of birth that controls. And then I'm going to just add one more thing to the mix, because why not, right? Why not make it a little bit more interesting? Is that if you're married, you can use your spouse's citizenship, your nationality, and do what's called cross-chargeability, right? If they were born in a country that wasn't subject to a retrogression. So again, this is information that's really important that your immigration attorney is going to talk to you about. They're going to need to know this information. So they will be asking, were you born somewhere other than the country of birth? Because that, depending on if there's a retrogression or not, it's going to impact how fast, what the processing time is going to be.
And so with that, the chargeability, right? So
Yeah.
you could be born in one country, but you're a citizen now in Canada.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be charged to Canada. We would be charged to the country we were born in, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if our spouse was born in a country that didn't experience a backlog, our spouse could be the primary applicant, and to avoid that backlog on the visa bulletin, right?
Right. So in your scenario, if the spouse was born in Canada, right, then we can use the spouse doesn't have to be the primary applicant. What we would do is we would identify under regulations, cross-chargeability is allowed in this situation. And there's no priority date or retrogression of a priority date because it's current for country of the spouse.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. The second question that went along with how long does the process take was, can I decide the sector I want to invest in? And I think that this goes back to the very beginning when we were talking about doing your due diligence. Ultimately, this investment, it is your decision. And you're going to make that decision based off the information that you have. The USCIS requirement for EB5 is that you're investing into a new commercial enterprise. They're not specific on, what sector that new business is in. So yeah, you can decide. And if you were interested in a Cmb partnership, we would provide you the full offering documents to give you that opportunity to do your due diligence. Come back to us with any questions. And please remember, I've got a whole project development team behind me that can really get down into the weeds with a lot of these questions that, as people are performing their due diligence, we have the staff available who created those documents to help answer those questions. Then on the job creation, Indy, when do we have to show the sustainment of 10 jobs? And is it different for direct and indirect EB5?
So for the direct EB5s, because there's a so let me step back. So regional centers, they get what's called they usually will have pre-approval, right, as a regional center. So they've already gone through the due diligence that they needed to with the USES to establish the project. So you have a pre-approval there. When it comes to direct,
we're talking about that I-924
yeah,
petition
right,
that provides the business plan to the USCIS, and upon the approval of that business plan,
yeah,
it provides deference, right, for all of
correct, right.
those
So,
people that would be filing their I-526 petitions, right?
correct, yeah. So regional centers are provided with that difference, as you correctly put it. When it comes to direct investment or direct EB5s, so the USCIS wants to be able to see that the business plan is able to establish that they are creating these 10 US jobs. But once you file your 526, typically USCIS, because right now it is taking a long period of time, the USCIS will issue, in most cases, an RFE these days for additional information regarding the business plan, possibly the job creation. They might ask for additional information regarding that commercial enterprise that is being undertaken. Okay. Whereas with the regional center, they've gotten that pre-approval in terms of being able to show the sustainment of the jobs. The USCIS is going to look at it from that conditional residency, right? So the I-526, we file it with the supporting documentation from the regional center that shows that this is how the jobs are going to be developed. However, we still need to substantiate it for the removal of the condition.
Okay. Thank you. Got a few more questions that came in. I'm going to put these two together. The first one, is there an easy way to get green card by investment? Indy and I, we've been discussing EB5 as a very direct route for the green card through investment. Easy in the sense that, you make sure you do your due diligence and understanding what the risk is involved before making a decision to invest. Yes. And making sure that you're working with an experienced immigration attorney that's going to make sure that all the information that the USCIS needs from you is there in your petition. And then here we have, is there any guarantee for EB5 and lower the investment due to COVID-19 by the government? Have you heard anything in the wires about lowering the investment amount?
No, I have not heard anything in the wires in terms of lowering the investment amount. In terms of, I want to take the first part of it. Is there any guarantee for EB5? Again, we had talked about it with the investment has to be at risk. What that means is that there can't be any guarantee language. At risk means that either the project will have a profit or possibly a loss, but it is an at-risk investment. So anytime you see a guarantee language, I think that shows a red flag to the USCIS. Now, when you're looking for a project, right? What you want to do is, again, it's the due diligence that you do, right? Is the project meeting your investment goal? Is the project or the regional center that you're looking into, what is their historically, what is their, how have they performed, right? Because that helps with mitigating your financial risk. Your financial risk has to be there because by definition of the program, it has to be at risk, but you can mitigate your exposure as much as possible. And the history of the regional strength of the regional center and the strength of the regional center is going to help you to make that analysis. And then the third is the immigration risk, right? Again, at regional center, what, how successful have they been with the I-826, I-526s and the I-829s? Those are all going to help you with your due diligence in ensuring that, you're looking at the right regional center that's going to fit with your risk tolerance.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that thorough answer. This next question, does the full investment amount need to be paid once, or can it be paid in installments? In the past, CMB partnerships, we required everything to be paid in full once before we would share the filing template with the immigration attorney. Recently, we have included additional language. It's very particular language that would allow installments, but it is a case-by-case basis, and conversations would need to be had with the filing attorney to make sure that the filing attorney was approving of this payment in installments. It would need, a lot of conversations would need to be had to see if we would even accept you as a limited partner through installments being paid. We would prefer everything to be paid, at once. Yeah.
I think, Kyle, that goes to, if it's an informed investor, right? And if you're, I think the question is, if you're paying in installments, then as an investor, do you have the risk tolerance for it? And so that you're absolutely right. You need to discuss it with your counsel or attorney, that you're going to be engaging to represent you in the process, and also work with the regional center in terms of what is available.
Mm-hmm. And one more additional piece I would add to this, in the case of our Group 79 partnership, the construction is set to conclude or end in Q3 of this year. And so that leaves a really small window to be fully invested in this project, to say that your funds went into that project and created jobs. If the construction ended, we want to have everyone fully subscribed before the completion of the construction in that project. So in the case of our Group 79, again, it is a case-by-case basis, and it would involve some serious conversations to understand what your timeline is for those installments, and communication with your immigration attorney on how that would all work.
Yeah.
Then, how much is the total investment? 900,000 plus attorney fees. Once investment made and paid to CMB, can I fly to US? So the required investment amount, the minimum required investment amount is $900,000 US. There are other fees associated with EB5, and these would also be paid at the same time. Once the investment has been made, your immigration attorney would be filing your first petition to the USCIS. If you were on, I'm sure Indy could elaborate a little bit more on this, but if you were on a separate visa or had a separate visa that allowed you to enter the US on, a tourist or business visa, or if you were here as a student, you would just maintain that visa until your adjustment of status or consulate interview came up.
Right. So in terms of attorney's fees, again, it's different for each attorney's office and representation. So you do want to reach out to them to find out what their fees are. Typically, in addition to your investment, there's going to be administrative fees as well as the attorney's fees. So that's one part of that. the question that we just received regarding once I've invested, the investment can be made and paid to the CMB, can I fly to the US? So the answer is a typical attorney answer, which is yes and no.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Okay, and I'll tell you why it's a yes and no. Right? If you're going to fly to if you've made the investment and you're like, okay, well, I did the I-526, right? That's filed. Can I come to the US on that I-526? The answer is no. The reason why is because we have to get the I-526 approval, and then you're going to submit the DS-260 and have your interview with the consulate. And so that's that process. The yes part of the process is, as Kyle mentioned, there are visas that allow you to enter the US while your 526 is pending. So, and what you have to keep in mind is that it's the intent at the time of entry that's going to control. Okay, so what do I mean by it's the intent at the time of entry? So if you have a multiple entry visitor's visa, you're still going to be allowed to travel back and forth on that B1, B2 visitor's visa in the US while your I-526 is pending. If you were a individual who if you decided, I want to do a master's degree, I want to go do a master's program in the US, well, you can come on a F1 student visa while your I-526 is pending. And it's because at that time of entry, your intent was to come and study. And there's other visas that are available too. H-1Bs, that's a non-immigrant work visa. You may already be here, you're on a student visa, you can convert to an H-1B while you still have your 526 pending. The same with an L1A or B visa, because those are intercompany visas. You could travel back and forth with, while working for an overseas employer. So you can come into the US, you're not prohibited, but there are visa options available. It's just we need to see what those are available for you at that time.
Okay. We have a very specific question. As currently no appointment is available to file a visa from Pakistan till April 2022. So how can an investor feel secure to invest in such projects? And before I hand this over to Indy, I will point out that with EB5, you're choosing a regional center and a partnership to invest into, and you're choosing an immigration attorney, and they're not the same company, right? They're separate. The immigration attorney is working for you to make sure that your immigration goes smoothly, and to respond to any questions that may come from the USCIS, and to guide you on the steps that you're taking. The regional center, we are managing this investment. We're managing the partnership. So feeling secure in the investment is different than feeling secure in the immigration as far as getting to the United States. Security in the investment, that's what CMB is constructing every time we create a new partnership. And that's why we want you to do your due diligence and understand this investment and what we will do for you to make sure that you fulfill the requirements of the USCIS. The security in the immigration, I think that that would come from Indy, her counsel, that the service that she's providing, right?
Right. And I want to touch up one of the reasons why we're having such a delay or backlog in terms of visa processing at the consulates and the embassies is we are in the middle of a global pandemic. And a lot of last year, the consulates had just completely shut down but now they are opening up, but they have limited capacity. So they're not working, they're not operating at, with all pistons running. They do have skeleton staff, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that they're social distancing while continuing to provide the services. So that's one aspect of the visa availability and consulate availability issue that's coming up. The second part of it is, because it is a global pandemic, some countries have been better at responding to it. And so that's also going to be impacting, availability of the consulates. I think as we as a global community see all of the efforts that are happening with the vaccination efforts and the social distancing that's been happening, that it'll start to open up. Unfortunately, we can't give a timeline of when that's going to happen. We just can continue to monitor what the Department of State says, what the USCIS says, and what the governmental agencies that impact this processing happen. I think one of the reasons why we're having a backlog is because even at the service centers that are adjudicating immigration petitions, they've got limited staff, right? They still have to continue to do the social distancing that's needed. But thankfully, they're starting to work on them. I think last year there was 2 months where nothing was happening. 3 months, nothing was happening. So
Right.
we're going to see that happening more and more.
Yeah. So we do thank you for your question. And so I guess the advice would be just to monitor what's happening at the embassies in Pakistan to see what the updates are as they come, as we deal with the pandemic further.
Right. And I would say that, reach out to Immigration Council and see if they might have a little bit more transparency than you might be getting, because again, at least, from my perspective, my team in the office, what we look at is, what is being published by the different governmental agencies that we work with. But we also look at our real time, what's happening to our own petitions, right? And sometimes they're not in sync. We're seeing, petitions being processed sooner than what is being published. So it would be good to engage and get that information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, can they start the process for eligibility assessment into the services until services resume? I think that option is always available. If you're in the preliminary steps to getting familiar with EB5 and discussing these goals with an immigration attorney, that can be started at any time. Feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is on the page, and I do encourage you to reach out to both Indy and myself.
That's okay.
Yes. And then, so feel free to reach out and we can definitely follow up. The last question we have here, it is something that we discussed during the webinar, and it was on visa allocation and country of birth. So real quick, being a Canadian citizen but being born in India, your EB5 would be charged to the Indian visa allocation.
Right. But what I want to point out is right now, India doesn't have a retrogression. They're current. Right. So what that means is your 526 application goes in, it should get processed within the time frame that is being right now published. And if it continues to be current, you will then be eligible for your consular appointment. If you're in the US on a work visa, you indicated that as a Canadian citizen. Well, Canadian citizens, they have a visa category that's not available to other countries. As a Canadian citizen, you can use you can see if you're eligible to obtain a TN visa. And a TN visa is a work visa. It does require sponsorship, yes, by a US employer, but you might be eligible for that. Explore that option. It's a single intent visa. That means that you can't have the dual intent to, pursue permanent residency, but intent is at the time that you're requesting that visa category. So explore that, because that is something that would be available or open to you as a Canadian citizen.
Excellent. Well, Indy, thank you so much for joining me on this webinar.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for such a detailed, deep down explanation into a lot of these, surface questions and understandings of EB5. I think that if you have any other further questions related to immigration or EB5, please reach out to Indy. As well as if you have any questions about CMB, EB5, or our current offerings, reach out to me, and we'll get you the information that that'll hopefully provide you with the information you need to do your due diligence and decide to make an EB5 investment.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I really appreciated those questions. They're really insightful and helped with our discussion. So appreciate your time and energy involved in meeting with us today.
Thanks again, Indy.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.